thank the gentleman. Chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Mr. Gershman, what a great event last night to honor.
Thank you for speaking.
Yeah, and for me to present awards to two dissidents who were standing up for human rights in North Korea, and in particularly Ji Sung Ho, who was, as you mentioned, at the State of the Union in crutches. For me to be able to do that was just an incredible experience, and I want to thank all of you for your what you do for human rights. And I think you mentioned Reagan's speech at Westminster in 1982, where he said the march of freedom and democracy would leave Marxism and Leninism on the ash heap of history. And I think he was right. But I want to focus on China. I could talk about Russia, and I could talk about, I've seen the rise and fall of ISIS under my tenure as chairman of Homeland Security, but now I see the rise of nation states being the bigger threats now, that being Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. I had a briefing yesterday in a classified setting on ZTE and Huawei and their efforts to conduct espionage in this country. I've also seen them in Sri Lanka, where they've burdened them with so much debt that they had to turn over a strategic port to the Chinese. We see the Chinese now in Djibouti for the first time. And we see them leveraging the continent of Africa into so much debt that they will be able to eventually take over these countries. They exploit them. They bring in their own workers. They don't even hire the host countries' workers, and they exploit their natural resources in what is this one belt, one road policy. I just want to open this discussion up to the three of you on your perception of the threat of China and what the United States needs to do in response. Mr. Gershman.
We talk about this all the time. I believe this is the most serious problem, the most serious threat our country faces today. I disagree with Congressman Rohrabacher. I think this is much, much more serious than the problem of terrorism. And it's something that I think our country is beginning to understand. In March, The Economist magazine had a cover story on China. And the bottom line of the cover story was, and this is a direct quote, "The West's 25-year bet on China has failed." The bet was that if China was brought into the World Trade Organization, was encouraged to grow economically, it would become a more liberal society and be part of the liberal world order. The exact opposite happened. And I think, Mr. Chairman, that I mentioned in my testimony Liu Xiaobo, that the Chinese destroyed him. In 2006, Liu Xiaobo, he's the Nobel laureate. Liu Xiaobo, who died in prison, Liu Xiaobo wrote an essay where he warned against the problem of China rising as a dictatorship. And he mentioned Hitler, he mentioned the Meiji emperors in Japan, he mentioned Stalin. And he said, this is a danger, this is going to be a threat for liberal democracy around the world. He was then silenced. But what he was saying then, I think, is now becoming understood by the foreign policy establishment. There was a recent article in Foreign Affairs by Kurt Campbell basically recognizing that the old view was wrong, that it hasn't happened that way, and that people are now recognizing that we have a new problem. It's a problem with the Belt and Road Initiative, which is not just an economic expansion. This is intimately tied to China's geopolitical and military strategy, precisely to get strategic ports in Sri Lanka or in Maldives, because countries fall into the debt trap and pay back by leasing their ports. This is the issue of sharp power. There's the issue of the South China Sea and the violation of the judgment of the International Tribunal, which said that they did not have control of those islands. This is now being recognized as a central problem. We have to get our minds around this, and we're really at the beginning of an effort to try to understand how to deal with this problem. And I just think that as we go forward in thinking about this problem, the immediate response is going to be a military, a geostrategic, an economic response, but don't forget the people of China. Don't forget that there are people like Liu Xiaobo in China. who want a different kind of future. And, when you tighten the centralized power the way Xi Jinping has centralized power, there are going to be a lot of unhappy people. There are going to be splits. I mean, we have to not give up on the possibility for democratic change in China and keep finding ways to support them. I realize I'm a great optimist. I'm always looking at the positive side in North Korea, in every country. But I really deeply believe that this is possible. I also think, by the way, that we have to keep our eyes focused on the minorities issue. What's happening with the Uyghurs is almost, it's not physically genocidal, but they've got internment camps, re-education camps, where 1 million Uyghurs are now in those camps. There should be an outcry in the Muslim world against this. I was speaking with one of our Uyghur participants in last night's event about this. Can we get the Muslim world to protest against the repression of the Uyghurs? There's the Tibetan issue. We have to challenge, we talked about this at the December hearing, we have to challenge China, which says that the Dalai Lama must accept the fact that China has, Tibet's been part of China since antiquity, which is not true. China invaded Tibet. Tibet did have an international legal identity. We have to challenge these things. We have to defend Taiwan. We have to defend Taiwan, which is a Confucius culture and a democracy. And China is very much aware of that. They would love to eliminate Taiwan or absorb Taiwan. We have to ensure that Taiwan can remain an independent democracy. We also have to defend Hong Kong. So we have to stand firm with the people who are in these struggles and not let them lose hope.
Yeah, my time has expired, but I just want to close by saying, I remember reading bin Laden's writings. He projected exactly what their intentions were, and the Chinese, I agree with you, are now the bigger threat, and they have telegraphed that by 2025, they will be a world-dominating power, both militarily and economically, and I think the United States needs to wake up to that fact.